Thank you everyone who is joining us for our Ask an Expert Financial Literacy and Business Management event. My name's Emma Miller. I am the program assistant for our College Success Program at the American Indian College Fund. And I'm so excited to be joined by all of these experts in personal finance and agriculture and business. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today. I'm excited. So as we're getting started, the participants feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can let us know where you're joining from, what school or organization you're associated with, your tribal affiliation. And also before we get started, I want to let all the participants know that we're giving away 10 financial literacy starter kits. So we have some personal finance books, including one by Shantae Moore's company. It's called How Money Works. And we have some treats from Passamaquoddy Maple, some piggy banks. So we have some fun stuff in there. So we'll do the drawing after the webinar is over. And if you win, I'll send you an email and get your mailing address and all that information. So the goal of this event is to increase all of our financial literacy, learn some more about personal finance. And we also have a lot of students who are interested in going into agriculture. So we're going to be talking about business management and farm management as well. So joining us, we have Jackson Brossi, who's the Executive Director at the Native CDFI Network. We have Shantae Moore, who's the Director of Native American Financial Literacy Services and a Certified Financial Educator. We have Stephanie Cote, who's the Programs Officer at Awista Corporation and a trainer on their Financial Empowerment for Teens and Young Adults curriculum. And we have Rachel Purdy, who's an extension economist at the Center for Farm Financial Management at the University of Minnesota. So thank you all for being here. And before we jump into questions, I'd love if everyone could give us a little bit more information about who you are and your background. So Jackson, do we want to start with you and we can kind of go around?
Sure thing. Yate, let's go. Jackson Brossi dash Genedo Tohi Glini initially. Belagane Bashin, but Anie dash Chido, Belagane dash Nala. Welcome, Jackson. I'm Navajo and I'm the Executive Director for the Native CDFI Network. And we are a member organization of these things called Community Development Financial Institutions. And my goal today is to help get that word out and have more of our college students and up and coming leaders know what CDFIs are if you don't already. And we got some good friends here. Stephanie works for a CDFI. So I can go on a while, but I'll leave it at that for right now. So thanks.
Thank you. Shantae, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shantae Moore. I'm also an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, and I'm also African American. I am the founder and director of Native American Financial Literacy Services. I am also a certified financial educator, as Emma had mentioned. So I've been working in the financial services industry for this is actually my 15th year in the financial services industry. I specialize in working with individual families one-on-one and helping them with their personal finances. And in the past 7 years, I've actually been working and teaching financial literacy workshops to nonprofits, organizations all across the country. And in the past 2 years, I've been working more closely with tribal nations and organizations to offer financial literacy programs and resources. So thank you all so much for having me today. I'm very grateful for the offer to share some of my knowledge today.
Thank you so much. Stephanie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Bonjour, Stephanie Cody and Dijnakas, Grand Traverse Bando Dawam in Wachipwa in Dumadagos. So, hello, my name is Stephanie Cote. I'm Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, or Anishinaabe, from Michigan. I'm with Awista Corporation, and we are a national native CDFI intermediary. And thank you, Jackson, for going first. So as Jackson mentioned, it's a community development financial institutions. As an intermediary, we have the opportunity to work with these financial institutions across the nation. And Awista holds the oldest Native American financial education curriculum. And as Emma had mentioned, we do have a youth curriculum that launched last year that we're excited to share some resources with you today on that. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Rachel, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on today. So I'm Rachel Purdy, and I am an extension economist with the Center for Farm Financial Management. Another hat that I wear is with FinPac. So that is a credit analysis software that is mainly for agriculture, but also used in commercial lending and more community banks, CDFIs, credit unions across the US. And another hat that I wear is I do a lot of financial management education for individuals, especially in agriculture, to help farmers, ranchers, and producers succeed and meet their goals by managing their finances.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for being here. So we're going to jump into some questions, but for all the participants, we are going to have time for your questions at the end. So if you think of something as we're talking, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll start to answer everyone's questions at the end. So I thought we could start just kind of with more general personal finance. So whoever can answer this, why is financial literacy important for students and for everyone?
I think I could start with that. I know that, so I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm considered an urban native, but I also represent two very marginalized populations of Black and Brown communities who typically are grown up very poor. We don't have wealth. We don't have parents who know how to handle wealth. And oftentimes there are no resources that will come directly into our communities to educate us about personal finances. I know for me, one of my passions is to spread financial literacy because unfortunately, we don't know what we don't know when it comes to finances. And oftentimes throughout lives, as we become adults, as we grow into our careers, most people make so many mistakes when it comes to their finances that it could have been avoided had they just been properly educated. I see too many people far too often when they become adults and they're in their 30s and 40s. And at that point, they're trying to rectify a lot of mistakes that they've made, and not knowing that they were making mistakes, because most of us, we learn through trial and error. Because we don't have the resources, we don't learn these things in school. So I think it's important to be proactive to understand that money makes the world go round. I know that in our tribal communities, it's often taboo to talk about finances, but I think that's something that we can overcome when we see that how our tribal nations can actually advance because of the education, and actually how we can create generational wealth to be passed on for our future generations. You know, we're always thinking 7 generations ahead. And so we have to be financially responsible when we're talking about taking care of our families and taking care of ourselves so that our communities can still continue to grow and to prosper as well.
Thanks. And I want to agree 100% with what Shante had to say. Personal finance, asset growth, financial education is important, I think, especially for this audience, because like Shante said, Native people aren't taught this. And the way I look at it is, if you've played Monopoly, it's kind of like you dropped some Native people and other disadvantaged people into the game without giving them that startup money or any training of how to play the game. And the game's already gone. And so if you're not ready to play, somebody's going to take advantage of you. And there's definitely no way you're going to buy Boardwalk. So maybe the goal isn't to buy a boardwalk, but the goal is to make sure that folks are prepared and ready to go out there and take care of their families, really. And I feel passionately about this. I think, like Shante said, Indian country is diverse, and folks are, we have urban communities and reservation and off-reservation communities, Alaska, Hawaii, Oklahoma, all very different folks. My background is I grew up in the Navajo Nation, and I think some of the folks in the chat, our experience is that there isn't any commerce on the Navajo Nation. So you spend on the weekends, we'd go and buy and spend our money off the reservation and help out other people's economies and not our own. And so that is what I eventually thought was wrong, and we need to do something about. And I'm happy to say that Native CDFIs are doing something about that in creating opportunity and helping to create businesses and coach businesses and provide access to capital. But getting back to what Shante said, we need to have a basic tool set in order to build wealth and protect assets and really provide the best livelihood for ourselves and our family and our extended family. Because if we were able to just take care of ourselves, that probably helps our extended family that otherwise we might be leaning on. So I could go on a while, but I think this is very important, and thank you for the College Fund for hosting this conversation. I think it's something that we need to be teaching in schools, but in the absence of that, it's great that everybody here is interested in this. So yeah, thank you.
Just to echo some of the earlier comments, a lot of the individuals that I work with, when they do come to me, it's almost too late. And it's never too late, but if you think about where you are today, you could either kind of set on a path towards a goal that you might have, or you could wait 5 years and you could be 5 years ahead on that path, or still where you're at today. And so that's kind of a decision that you start setting goals and planning for what you might want to do later now. It's only going to benefit you, especially at the stage that many of you are at. You have something on your side that is so important, and that is time. You have time to set those goals and figure out what it is you want to do. And as far as personal financial literacy and management goes, I know that if any of you have this entrepreneurship lean that Jackson might have talked about, something that I see with the individuals that I work with that sets them up for success is just having your personal finances in order, so that then you have that cushion to take that leap and start a business or join a startup, things like that.
Well, it's hard to follow all that. Just everyone had really great answers to the question. I think now is just a fundamental time in your life cycle. So starting up on finances now, like Rachel said, will give you maybe a leg up in other communities. And I know it wasn't talked about at my dinner table, finances. And when it was, now as an adult, I'm realizing it was a very horrible advice. So yeah, it's just a really great time to dive into managing your own finances. Maybe you're starting a business, maybe you're going to school, and learning just as much as you can will prepare you all the better for the future. So.
That's great. Thank you all. So I think a lot of times personal finance and all the terms that go with it can be intimidating. So in what ways can students make personal finance more approachable? And what steps can students take to set themselves up for financial success?
I can take a crack at it. So something that I am learning, so I just full disclosure, I finished college 2 years ago, so I'm a little bit new kid on the block here. But there is a lot of gatekeeping that goes on with a lot of these conversations and a lot of these topics. And if you something that I've found very helpful is informational interviews. So many people are willing to help you inside and outside of your community. Someone that, so I've been very focused in agriculture, and even just getting outside of that and talking to other economists. Everyone seems pretty willing to help, especially if you show that kind of first initiative to ask for that informational interview. And if you just ask questions. There's no such, I know it's cliche, but there really is no such thing as a stupid question. And oftentimes, if you can find a great mentor or just someone that would sit down to you and explain things to you in terms that humans understand, that you don't need a Juris Doctorate or a CPA to understand, I think that can make a world of difference. And so really lean on anyone that is a leader. I know I would be happy to, I don't know, if you're interested in sort of entrepreneurship lean, I'd be happy to have conversations with any of you. I'm sure many of our panelists would as well. And so just really kind of finding a way to get that information accessible. And the other thing too is I know that there's a lot of kind of pushback on internet information as far as like Wikipedia and things, but Investopedia is a great resource for putting some of these finance terms and more basic understanding, what I found to be more accessible. There's a lot of great resources and video series out there. So I'm going to do a plug for something that my work does. We have, if you're interested in finance, an online course. It's free, accessible to everyone. It's called Interpreting and Developing Financial Statements and Measures. And so if you're just kind of wanting to start at the beginning of what is a balance sheet, those sort of concepts, that's just one of the many resources that are out there.
I'd like to add, I think making personal finance approachable might start with just looking at finance and participating in the economy approachable. And I think first off, it's important to think that Native people, I think the financial system, things like interest rates are somewhat foreign to Native people. That's true. But asset growth, asset building, looking out for your family, transfer and building wealth or something that you can transfer to the next generation, that's not foreign to us. That's not new to us. And so I think that in that frame, you think about Native people that are planters, that plan things in the spring, and they plant and they work hard and they take care of their crops. And then at the end of the season, they're able to harvest that. I think that type of work, I think of Native people who had large herds and cattle and sheep, like Navajos. They did a lot of work to protect that, to build that wealth, really is what it was. And so I think those types of things are not foreign to Native people. So I think it's first important to kind of go into that mindset that while things like credit cards and interest rates are foreign, the idea of building wealth and assets and working hard and taking some risks, that's not foreign to us. And so I'd really kind of start with that mindset and then look at the areas that we don't know that much about. You might have not have learned about, like interest rates I think the good thing is there are a lot of resources out there, and I know you can do it.
Yeah, I would like to share, I echo Rachel and Jackson's comments. I think for me, I know when I work with a lot of families one-on-one, my biggest challenge is helping them to overcome their mental thinking about money. You know, oftentimes we're programmed to think money is a bad thing, that, rich people do bad things with money. And I've seen where generationally people will steer away from intentionally not becoming educated because they believe that talking about money or having wealth or having assets is not a good thing. And it's actually the total opposite. So I think that's the first thing, is to say, you know what? It's okay for me to make a good income. It's okay for me to save money and invest wisely. It's okay for me to try to grow my wealth, because there are plenty of good people who have a lot of money and they do amazingly great things with it. So I think that's the first thing. The secondly, like I said, is just to recognize, well, for one, I know Rachel kind of touched on it, like doing internet searches. There are so many resources out there, a lot of free resources. I always just caution people, just make sure that they're professional resources, that they're vetted resources. I'll share a couple links in the chat as we go along from my organization. And again, the company that I work with, who teaches these financial literacy workshops. Everyone is so crazy, especially with social media. There's so many self-proclaimed experts, right? And when it comes to finances, this is a very highly regulated industry. So you always want to make sure whoever you're talking to and whoever is giving you this quote unquote advice is actually, has some certifications or professional designations. But I would just like to say, but just go in with an open mind. I know that I spend a lot of time teaching people, because the number one question I receive is, I have money, or I want to save, I want to invest, but I don't know where to start. So the resources that I'll post will give you the exact steps, and just follow it. I would just say, just try it, because sometimes, I wouldn't say, don't say that doesn't work, or maybe that's not for me, before even trying to see, oh, I need to look at my finances differently. Maybe the way my mom and dad did it, it probably wasn't successful. So maybe I should try something differently. So for me, it's a lot about mindset. We just have to accept and understand it's okay to try and, do better with finances. And it's okay to, try to improve our wealth and our assets that we hope to have and pass on.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. And the one thing that I would do if I had one piece of advice, first step to take, and I'm going to share my screen, is to track your monthly budget. And Emma can share, I sent her the resources and I can't share files, but I can share this link where you can scroll down and download as many resources as you'd like from our page. But if you're not already doing this, I would say start with that monthly budget, see what you have coming in and coming out, seeing your cash flow. And then there's also a money tracker sheet, which gets into detail just to see what are your daily expenses. Take like a whole month and, track, what did I spend for breakfast? What did I spend for lunch, dinner, snacks, and other. And then you can plug it into this monthly budget that you set for yourself. See what those budget to actuals are actually like. What am I actually spending? This is a first step that we recommend, because a lot of people don't know. They're like, I have, a job and I don't know where the money goes. And then they come to find out it's going towards, that Netflix, Hulu, ESPN Plus subscriptions, plus your food. I went out 5 days a week. And it's just an eye opener, but that's one thing that we recommend, is just to see what you're actually doing. And then from there, moving on to where can I cut and where can I save? So saving's a big piece in managing your finances in order to save for those assets that you'd like to attain in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, those are all really good resources. I know a couple people in the chat have been asking for those, so I will send a follow-up email with the resources that Rachel and Stephanie shared, even though I know they're in the chat, but it can get lost. So that's excellent. We're also having some great questions come in, so we'll get to those in a few minutes. Thank you, everyone, for asking your questions. All right, so kind of going more into the business management and farm management side of things, for students who do have the goal of either owning their own business or running a farm, or just going into agriculture, what advice would you have for those students, either financial or otherwise?
I know that's Rachel's expertise, but I just wanted to say I do work with a lot of business owners, and the number one advice that I give them is you have to keep your personal finances completely separate from anything you plan to do for your business. You cannot commingle them whatsoever. The tracking has to be specific. But I think as a business owner, you have to, have a business plan. You have to prepare for so many what ifs that can come up with having a business. You got to learn how to protect your business, how to properly set it up. But again, most importantly, my number one advice is keep the finances completely separate. So as Rachel mentioned, I know that people are more confident to go into business when they do have their personal finances in order, because they know, they have the cushion, they know how to plan and prepare, and it's easier for them to transition that same mindset and thinking toward starting the actual business. So that's the number one piece of advice. Keep everything completely separate bank accounts. You have a business checking account, you have your personal checking account. You have to maintain those completely separate.
So this is a great question, and thanks, Shantae, for jumping in. I'd say a couple things I touched on earlier, just having that strong foundation to go ahead and take some of those risks. But one thing is we really talk about a lot with the group that I work with is planning, and you don't have to have a 30-year plan down to the day, but really start looking at, if you're at the beginning stages, kind of just like prospecting what you think you might want to do. Do some research, figure out, is there anyone else in the space? It's because so often we see people coming to me that say, I have this great plan, I bought these cows, it's going to be great. And then you start asking questions of, what are you going to do with them? What's the plan here? And there is no plan. And so, and so much of this, there are going to be a lot of people trying to sell you a business plan, and that's not what we like to see, because the value in a business plan is for you to sit down and write what your vision is, what you want to do. And so one of the resources, and I'll put it in the chat here, that we have it's called Ag Plan. And it's a free online business planning resource that helps you through this process. And again, the key word there is free, because really paying for a business plan, that's only just going to get you a piece of paper that says what someone else would do. And that is not necessarily what you need to succeed. And another kind of piece of advice that I would have for anyone looking to start a business is that there are so many resources out there, whether it's through, I know the CDFIs are really working on helping develop these businesses, but even something like a generic USDA has a lot of grants and startups, and there's probably my fellow panelists can speak to this a little bit better than I can. But even just in my work, I work with a lot of beginning farmers and ranchers, and there's just so much resources out there. A lot of people want you to succeed if you go this route.
Thanks. I've got a couple words. Yeah, first off, if you're interested in doing any work in agriculture and you want to be an agriculture entrepreneur, or you want to just raise some horses or cattle or something like that, Ag Plan that Rachel Purdy mentioned is great. Our organization's partnered with them, and we've done a few different trainings on it. You can go to our YouTube page, or I think their page, and we have some videos of how to use the Ag Plan. I think that's where I would start. And I think it'd be a great resource if you're interested in that. And then secondly, if you are otherwise interested, I'm going to make another plug for Native CDFIs. There are 69 of these certified CDFIs across 35 states. And so there isn't one, you're not guaranteed to have one in your backyard, but there probably is one somewhere near you that might be interested. They all do different things, and they all specialize in different things, and not all of them are going to be able to help you out. But I still think it'd be worth looking, especially if you have a tribal one. I saw somebody's from Muskogee in there, and Muskogee has a great tribal CDFI that also is doing some work in agriculture. I saw some folks from Navajo folks, some of my family, and Navajo Nation has a CDFI that's starting up. But I think another one I'd recommend folks look at is Native Community Capital. They do work in Arizona and New Mexico, so you can look them up. They special, and if you work with them to get a loan, they want you to succeed. And then I think, I don't know, I've started a couple of businesses myself, and one person in the chat said they feel a bit overwhelmed. I'd make sure that you're paying your quarterly taxes. I think that'd be one of the first things I start with, and then talk with somebody like Shantae or Stephanie or someone else who's been in the area. I guess one other resource. I do some volunteer work with the Danette Chamber of Commerce, and so there might be other types of chambers of commerce that could be relevant to you and what you do, and maybe you can find a mentor there. There is no formula for finding a mentor, but I think especially if you're young, folks are more likely to respond and give you some help if you ask for it. And that's kind of the key is if you ask for it. And I really don't think there's any harm in asking. The worst they can say is no, or the worst they can do is ignore your email, and you can email somebody else, or you can call somebody else.
So. Everyone going last, I don't have a ton more to say other than if you really want that business help, I'm going to drop a link into where you can find a CDFI in your region. I was just typing it up now. I muted myself, sorry. Otherwise, I would have shared it as an Excel itself. But you can find your local CDFI. It might be native, it might be non-native. Obviously, I'm partial to the native CDFIs, but they all have, a lot of them have classes that you can take. And I'd recommend getting into one of those classes, either to manage your own personal finances, or they might have a business startup. I know someone had mentioned Alaska, Spruce Root and Alaska Growth Capital both have really good entrepreneurship programs that they could walk you through the steps. And a lot of the other native CDFIs have similar ones. So if it were me and I were jumping into a business, I would contact my local CDFI and see what classes they have available. Then you can get handheld through the process.
I feel like we got so many good resources in the last few minutes. That's awesome. And again, I'm going to collect all of these and send them out in case anyone's losing track in the chat. So just so everyone knows. So I do want to give us time for some of the questions that are coming in. But just to start to wrap up a little bit, I know a lot of students are concerned with giving back to their community. So in what ways can being an entrepreneur and, running your own business give back to your community?
I can start with that one. Owning a business, especially if it's local, is going to feed into that local economy. Sorry, I'm used to training myself. So I have this, the local economy, a little infograph to show what it looks like when you share within your community. Oh, did I share the right screen? So everyone can see the little circle of life, or no, not circle, the circle of community. So when you own that business, you're right in the heart of what that economy is surviving on. So just by owning a business and you're feeding into that local economy. Next, you're going to when you purchase from your community, so going to those local businesses, you're going to keep the economy within that little, this little hub here. And that's how economies grow. We're seeing economic deserts because people are shopping at those border towns. You're going to the Walmarts, you're eating out at the McDonald's, and the people at the top of those businesses are just raking in the money and they're not feeding it back into that local centralized economy. So just by owning a business, you're going to be supporting and giving back to your community. Of course, there are other ways you can donate, you can volunteer time, but just getting out there and becoming an entrepreneur is a great big step to building your economy.
I think if you are an entrepreneur, and I think absolutely it contributes to your economy and your community in more ways than you would think. So, for example, if you started up a business that was marginally successful, not only would you help yourself, but I think you'd also influence your friends and your family, and you got a nephew or niece that might look up to you, and then they see you doing something, they can think that they can do it. I think, and maybe that's one of the challenges that we have in our community is we don't have those role models that went out and started Instagram or something like that. But I think if somebody were able to do that, I think that's great. I think it's also, you're going to have to do your homework, and it's not going to be easy. But I think that's anything that is worthwhile.
I was just going to share, I know that as an entrepreneur, a Native woman entrepreneur in Chicago, this great big city here, I 100% agree with Jackson said. You know, I think so many youth and individuals who have been inspired by my entrepreneurial efforts, and it's not a chip on my shoulder, but because I've kind of laid that path for them and shown them that, look, I came from the same, you know, poor neighborhood as you, but I've been able to come out of that and start a business and be successful. I think that's so huge to be able to provide that example. Often in Indian country, you know, our history has been defined by path makers, by people who just said, I'm going to take this on and lead the way for others so that they can come behind me and be successful as well. And then, you know, as an entrepreneur, we also create jobs. You know, it's how many places do we go to and they're like, I can't find jobs. And, or, you know, I think Stephanie mentioned we're giving our money to people outside of our communities. So I love that I have an opportunity where I can create a platform to create jobs for members in my community to where they probably couldn't go to downtown Chicago and work for one of those big companies down there. But because I have a platform and I've created this company, you know, they can work with me and build their own wealth and, you know, have stable income for themselves. So I think it's something that, you know, you think as an entrepreneur, I think way beyond me and my family. I think about how can I support my community? How can I expand, you know, not just in Chicago, but nationally, to continue to help, you know, all of our Native communities.
So many great comments on this so far. So something in economics that we talk about is critical mass, and especially in the context of rural areas, but also in some of these urban areas as well. And that is, if there's an opportunity in there, if there's a business circulating, like other panelists have said, they hire people. But then as that business grows, we might need someone providing supplies for that business. And so then there's an opportunity for niece, nephew, friend, someone else in your community to fill that niche. And so if we can, your business definitely can start to be a driver for those around you. And you really have an opportunity to be an agent of change.
Thank you all so much. I have more questions written down, but we're getting so many in the chat that I think we should just move on to that. Before we do, Stephanie, did you want to share any more of the resources I know you shared a couple already, but if you want to talk a little bit more about the resources you have, and then I'll send those out in the email as a follow-up.
Sure, I'll be brief. And I know one was a question in the chat. That I have to send you because I was like, oh, we have this resource and I didn't email it over. So someone had mentioned how to manage lump sum payments. Am I sharing that? Let me see. Sure. There you go. If you get like a stimulus check, again, that website, if you scroll down, it's in that mix of resources. But this is something that's fun that we teach in our youth curriculum because, and it's an addendum. It's not a big, it's an add-on because not every tribe gets per caps. But this is just a fun activity that you can do to kind of brainstorm what you want to do with that lump sum payment. You can speak with someone like Shantae, who is a certified financial education. Sorry, I'm slaughtering the acronym. Anyway, you can speak with someone who's certified, who knows what they're talking about if you want to invest, but you can also be brainstorming like, do I need a car? Do I need a down payment for rent? And kind of bubble it out and then go through here and set like action plan. Like, what am I going to do with each amount for each piece? Another that we have, just a few, we have a circle of life budget. Is just another budgeting activity that you can go through and see where you're spending each and make your little pie chart to visually see, oh my gosh, I'm spending $500 a month on food. That's a lot of money. And then you can go down and set your ideal budget. So that's something I sent over to Emma. Calculating your college. I wish I had this. I was just last night talking with my husband and father-in-law about our college experiences, and I had to pay for my whole everything. Luckily, with scholarships, I was able to curb a lot of the expenses. But that first year, I had saved for the 4 years of high school $20,000, and it immediately was eaten up that first year. It was so devastating. So anyway, I wish I had had this worksheet to really show exactly what I'm going to be spending, and to see like what scholarships I did have or opportunities, and then to see where I might have needed a little extra help. Another thing is like actually calculating out what you want. Like maybe I could have gone to a community college, which would have saved me a bit of money, or maybe that I went to the in-state public because out of state was just out of reach. But going through and asking these questions, I shared the local economy bubble, the money tracker, and then that monthly tracker sheet. So if you scroll through and download some of the other resources, Awista has a lot, and it's all geared toward your age demographic, so that youth area. And it's all stuff that I wish I had when I was in my early 20s. So thanks for letting me share, Emma.
Those are so great. I feel like those are really helpful to kind of see all laid out, and especially if you're a student, it can be really helpful to see that. All right, so getting to some of the student questions, we can just start with some of the basic ones and then move into the business ones. So someone asked, how much of your income should you try to save? And anyone can feel free to take these.
I think I could address that. So I know the typical financial advice is to save 10% of your income, but oftentimes it's really hard to do. It's like most times people are like, I'm making this money and I don't have anything left over to save. So I always typically recommend to my clients it's not about how much you save, it's about your consistency in saving. Because when we're trying to improve our finances, it's like building a muscle. This is a muscle you've probably never worked out, probably never done it before. So I don't want you to get hung up on, oh, I need to save a certain dollar amount, but more so get more so in the practice of consistently putting some money away on a regular basis. It could be as simple as $5 a week, but as long as every single week you put that $5 away, you're getting in the habit of setting aside that money. You're doing it consistently so that when you do have more money coming in, you're going to already know how to set that money aside. They could be a small weekly amount. It could be a small monthly amount. I love the resources Stephanie shared, because if you don't know where your money is going, you have no clue how much you can save. So when you go through a worksheet like that, you should be able to identify what we call your discretionary income, what's left over. And of that discretionary income, if it's $5 a month, then put that aside. If it's $100 a month, then just put that aside. I just say, just make sure you make that sacrifice and do it on a consistent basis. So it's not necessarily how much you save from my perspective. It's just about building that habit and doing it consistently.
I'm going to share some, I know I'm like the queen of resources, but here are some calculators that I just discovered. So dinkytown.net has like a ton of calculators. You can see like, what can I actually save, or what's going to get me toward a goal? Like, what do I need for down payment? And I'm like, whoa, I'd never seen that before until this year. So mind blown, might help. Another is the FIRE method. Someone had mentioned that, and it's interesting. Again, like Shantae said, you might just be paycheck to paycheck. So you really have to find out what works for your budget and what you're doing. After I did the FIRE calculator, I was like, I'm never retiring. But you might be able to work it out. I know a few people in their early 20s, they're starting this and they're getting really pumped up to retire at 40. So might be something to check out. And yeah, savings is all personal. So what works best for you and your budget?
Yeah, I think it's great to take some of those resources and kind of fit it to you, because I mean, personal finance is very personal. So you can gather these things from a bunch of different places and figure out what works best for you. So kind of going off of that first question, someone said, I have some savings and I'd like to invest. I don't have any experience in this area. What advice do you have for people like me? Who do I trust?
I think I'll start with that one again. So first of all, I don't believe in blanket advice, because like we just mentioned, personal finances are so personal. So what works for me in my stimulus check will probably not work for anyone else on this webinar. So let's just make that very, very clear. So that's why I don't like the theory of, oh, when people say, well, do this with your money and buy these stocks, like that doesn't work for everyone. So I would probably just give you advice on how to find trusted professionals to work with, because that's ultimately what you need, is to have someone that you can sit down with to work with you one-on-one with your finances, to even determine if investing even makes sense for you. Sometimes people think, oh, I should invest this money in the stock market, or I should go and buy, I heard cattle and livestock. Those might not be the best financial decisions for you. So you want to work with someone who is licensed and has appropriate certifications in the financial services industry. I'll post a link in the chat, because I see too many people get taken advantage of by these self-proclaimed expert non-experts. I see too many people on social media following advice from individuals who are not qualified to give advice. So I do presentations all the time about just finding those trusted professionals that you can work with. I know that my company, we specifically have licensed Native financial professionals, because we often don't trust non-natives with our money, right? Like it's always stay away. We don't want you taking our money. So I'll share a link that I have with my company. If you're looking for some of that one-on-one personal advice, we offer all of our services completely free to anyone who is associated, who's an actual enrolled tribal member or associated with a tribal organization. So I'd be happy to share that, because at least we can give you the sounding stone of what you probably should do. But again, you want to seek to work with professionals to help you make that decision. There's no way, if anyone says, yeah, just do this and save and invest this way, that's someone I would probably run far, far away from, because no one should be giving you advice without sitting down with you and looking at your personal finances on a one-on-one basis. So I'll share a link to, like I said, to my organization, because we'll be happy to help anyone on this webinar with that. And we do it free. It's all complimentary. So no paying fees or anything for that.
I think I would take advantage of that, but and I guess I'm going to give some advice. I'm not a financial planning professional here, but my advice for if you're young and you have a little bit of money and you're interested in looking at the stock market, I think we'll just reiterate what Shante said. The stock market isn't going to be the answer, probably not the answer to most people's questions, what they should do with their extra money. But if you really want to do that, and if you're interested in it, and I've been interested in it, then you should, it's really easier. It's never been easier than it is now to put a little bit of money in. And I think that if you're interested in, and you have a little bit of a risk appetite for it, then you should set up a brokerage account with one of the brokerages that trades for free with zero commissions. And people, you can set something, go vanguard.com or even Robinhood. But I guess I wouldn't put a ton of money there. I think you could just start with 50 or $100 and start to kind of learn things that way. And that's what I did a while back, and it's been more fun than I look at more it as a learning experience than major investments, and that's not what I would do. But I think either way, it's a really small investment, $20-50. I think it's worth looking into that, and it'll motivate you to be a little more aware of what's going on with the market and understand what people are talking about when they're talking about it. So just one more thing.
I dropped a few more resources in the chat. Dr. Percap is someone, Sean Spruce, who is pretty well versed in finances, and he has a lot of articles around this issue, around saving and investing. And then the YouTube channel is Sequoia Fund. They're a native CDFI, and they interviewed Sean Spruce. They've got a few other interviews on there. I think they do a weekly cast, just something to check out. And my personal go-to with investing was Stash, because that platform is built to educate on investing. So if you wanted to, it's an app you can join for free, and it's got a ton of learning content. So you don't have to put in to learn. And then other people, I was on a committee that was going through and assessing tech, fintech, financial education technology, and they recommended Acorns. I personally have not utilized Acorns, but both of those were built to educate around saving and investing. So my 2 cents.
So I know the question was about savings, but the one thing I would say, just as kind of a cautionary tale, right now sometimes credit for personal use, like credit cards, it can be pretty easy to get. And sometimes I get individuals coming to me, and they have credit cards that are maxed out at interest rates that you would never be able to invest and get that return on them. And so when you're looking at whether the question about how much should we save or things like that, if you do have any of those, find yourself in a situation where you have these high interest loans, and obviously like others have mentioned, work with a professional on this, but you might consider even just taking care of those high debt burdens, high interest burdens before looking at saving, because you're not going to get that same return in the stock market as you're paying in interest.
Agree 100%. Yeah. I don't, yeah, I'm not saying start a brokerage account. You need to knock out the credit card debt first. Absolutely.
I would say you could do both at the same time. So it's because sometimes it's often, well, let me take, because that's another thing I do. A lot of people, they'll say, let me pay off my debt first, and then I'll save and invest, Shantae. Let me do this first. And oftentimes there's something that will always come up. There's always a financial, hurricane that just comes through and wipe all of our plans out. So again, like we talked about before, it's all about planning. I think you can pay down your debt at the same time while saving, investing. But that's a great point, Rachel. We don't want to ignore the debt at all.
So I feel like this question that just came in is sort of related. Someone asked if we can talk about emergency funds. So could someone talk a little bit about that, why that's important and what that even means?
Yeah, I can jump in real quickly on that. So an emergency fund is generally money that you want to have set aside for emergencies that happen to come up. If we need to pay off, I know my truck, I'm always having issues with it. I'm always having maintenance or tires or something that I need to get fixed. Or something with my children. I'm always having some random fee that comes from their school that I have to pay for. So the purpose of an emergency fund is to have money available to you that you can quickly access to pay for those last minute emergencies that come up. The whole purpose of it is to avoid using a credit card or some other form of credit to take care of those emergencies. Now, I understand some people don't have anything but the ability to leverage, a form of credit, but that's something that we want to try and avoid, right? The whole goal is to get out of debt, not to add on to the debt. The one thing that I do want to say about emergency fund, though, is that it's about having money set aside somewhere that you will not access it. That could be in a separate savings account, or it could be in a shoebox under your bed. I typically like to have an emergency fund set aside in maybe in a low cost investment account, so where you can earn more interest than what you would typically get at your bank account. But it requires a lot of discipline because for me, I know that I can go on my phone app and I can make a transfer from my savings account to my checking account. So if you don't have that discipline, then you probably want to set it to somewhere where you can't make that easy transfer. But again, it's just to set aside something. I always tell people it's not like you're going to accumulate all of a sudden, hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars overnight either. So understand it takes time to build an emergency fund, but trust me, when those emergencies come up, you'll be so happy that you set aside some money and you didn't have to resort to a credit card to take care of those emergencies.
Excellent, thank you. So we'll probably have time for maybe one more question. We're reaching the end here. So just to touch on the business side a little bit, someone asked, how would I know if my business plan is ready or complete? And how would I financially protect my business? So kind of two different questions if anyone wants to take that on.
So something we talk a lot about business plans is that they're never done. You will never, if you're waiting to have the perfect business plan to start your business, you will never start your business. We like to think of business plans as a living document because as opportunities come up, as you become more into the space that your business is operating in, you'll kind of start to realize there's maybe other avenues you want to pivot or grow your business into. And so really, I think that as long as your business plan is kind of ready to go, when you feel confident that you can explain what it is you're wanting to do, where you're going to get income from effectively, whether it's selling a product or a service. And oftentimes to start the business, we do see people going in to get funding, whether that's in a traditional lending environment or a CDFI or kind of any sort of investor that you have. And so if you can explain what's going on to a stranger effectively, then your business plan is kind of ready to go get that, take that next step. But it's not kind of binary. It's not done or not done. It really should be reevaluated at least annually. to take a look at where you're headed to go.
What, Emma, what was the second part of that question? I think Rachel's spot on there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the second part was, as a small business owner, how would I financially protect my business?
Oh, well, it all depends on what kind of business you're getting into. And so, yeah, the question of that answer, I mean, the answer to that question could be a book. You start talking about how your structure for your business. Do you want to do an LLC to, or does it make sense to do that? Do you want to do an S corp? It's kind of depend, and I think maybe getting back to some of the themes we've been saying is it's worth talking to a few other people. I think we're able to help as much as we can right here in this short time frame. But I think if you're looking at starting a business, there's probably other people you can sit down and have a real in-depth discussion with.
I was going to add to that real quickly. I would say two things. Always have business insurance. I think a lot of business owners do not get, I can't think of the word. It's another word for business insurance. Because the last thing you want is a lawsuit. People are so lawsuit happy nowadays. They will try and file a lawsuit, take you to court and take all your money that they think you might have. But secondly, always have a business succession plan as well, especially if you have partners in business or, let's say you own a beauty salon. What happens to that beauty salon if you're no longer here? Who would take ownership of it? Is it your children? Is it family? Have those things in writing, because those are things that will protect your business if something happened to you and you were no longer able to run it.
And I'm going to drop a link in the chat. Very similar to ag transitions, we have kind of a sibling ag plan. We have ag transitions, which is designed to help you start writing that transition plan. The thought behind that being, if you're looking at doing like an estate plan or a will, that you can have it all in writing and be able to save on those legal fees when you go into an attorney to get that kind of finalized. So I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Thank you so much. I feel like we could do a whole other hour with everyone's questions, but we'll send out all of these resources afterwards, and hopefully that'll help answer any of the questions that we didn't have time to get to. And just a reminder to all the participants, we're going to do the drawing for the financial literacy starter kits after this. There's some great books and some treats and a piggy bank, so that'll be fun. So keep an eye out for an email from me if you won one of those. And thank you to all of our panelists for joining and sharing your time and your expertise with us today. This was such a great and helpful conversation, and I really appreciate it. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you.